Hello and welcome to episode 269 of the THERSday Night Podcast. My name is Brady, joined as always by David. David, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday?
Doing good, I feel like if you can tell, my tone is much better from our show on Sunday. Just because, I kind of sat with it, got to see some of the rewatch, and begrudgingly, I really don't think that Memphis told us a lot of new things outside of the fact that TJ Finley is good. And that's only new because he obviously didn't play week one. So other than that, doing pretty good. And yourself?
Yeah, I guess we'll get into the quarterback thing as the pod goes on, but should say, as David teased there, we did do the post-game show, released that on Sunday, and that's going to be the plan going forward. And so if you did not listen to that, hopefully if I figure out my YouTubing skills, I'll drop a little square you can click on to watch that video now in this video. I'll also drop a link in the description for that, so just kind of hit you in all angles of ways to catch up on the Memphis post-game show if you haven't done yet. And that's where we're really going to do the bulk of our talk on that game, but I did want to always leave open the opportunity for us to get some final thoughts out. Anything that we missed going through that, because I don't necessarily want it to be all-inclusive, because, more about the game might come up over the course between when we record on Sunday and when we're next in the lab. So, on that note, there's something that I even meant to talk about on that. Speaking to why I want to leave the door open to, other pods continue to speak about it. It's something that I noticed from the first couple of games now, that both of the times Georgia State had won the coin toss, and both of the times Georgia State had elected to receive. And I think it ultimately played out to their detriment the way the games went. Against Ole Miss, it led to a middle eighting of extreme proportion by the Rebels, and it kind of happened again in this one where Memphis gets a field goal, final play of the second quarter, and then gets the ball to start the second half. And of course, Georgia State could have gotten stops. Like, each of those games, it's not like it was a fait accompli that they were going to give up points, but the way it played out, I just think that they game scripted themselves a little, because I always think you want to start the third quarter if you can. But Del McGee's answer about it, and I don't have the audio like I did in the post-game show for this, but he was basically like, when you're going up in these games against where you don't have the talent advantage, you want to start off the first quarter with the ball to give yourself the most possessions. And I don't know if I fully agree with the logic looking at the full board, but it does suggest to me that it might have been a two-off. That from now on, when they win the coin toss, they might start deferring, because it's going to be out of those situations where they feel like they're at a distinct disadvantage. And so we got a little explanation I wanted to circle back to that, mileage may vary on whether you think it makes sense, but that is the explanation, and there was some thought put behind it rather than just kind of like rah, offense go, all that type of stuff. So I thought that was an interesting thing to follow back up on and share.
Obviously with respect to Coach McGee's experience, I have just been a football fan for, 20 some odd years, but I did say the word fan. I am clearly not a football coach. I think the logic there is extremely sound. I just disagree with the process. You know what I mean? Like, I think that especially if I have a talent disadvantage, I would want to make sure that I started off the second half with the ball. And I think part of that is just, obviously the first 30 minutes of a football game matter. This is not me telling you that the first half in games don't matter. That's not where I want to go with this. But I guess to me, it is so much easier to win the second half than it is, to win the game because of the second half than it is because of the first half, if that makes sense. So to me, starting off the third quarter with the football makes a lot of sense. And I don't want to rehash it and just go by play about the middle four for Georgia State versus Memphis. But if you just go look at the drive charts, after Georgia State had the long touchdown to go up two, touchdown drive to go up two, from there is kind of where the wheels
They probably had like
off.
6 plays in the course of like 8 or 9 game minutes.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there was a big stretch where they just didn't have possession. And it just meant that the defense got completely ground down and was a big factor in the way the game played out. And you could also circle around and say that they did that in the first half, but I think we're both biased towards thinking the second half usually matters more. So it's like if you could line it up where that happens in your benefit, you would rather have it happen in the last 2 quarters. But it's something that Sean Elliott did a few times. Like, I forget exactly which years, but there was definitely an inclination to do the same thing for a little bit of time. And kind of with the idea of, like, we like our offense, we want to get there and set the tone. And certainly last year we saw this team struggle to get out to good starts. And so I also understand the thinking there. But honestly, there's been more information, and maybe I'm asking better questions. Maybe people are asking better questions this year, but we're getting some more insight into Del McGee, and so I like it on that grounds as well. I think ultimately we're not trying to, we're not doing rocket science when we have our media availabilities, but we're hoping to get out to the fans who are following the program, like just the thinking that goes on with what the head coach is doing game to game. And so I think on that sense, whether you agree with it or not entirely, sounds like it might change going forward. Sounds like it might have been a pretty specific strategy, but also that just was what was going on. So I found that interesting. I don't know if anything else from Memphis is worth rehashing that you had that you wanted to bring up before we pivot to Murray State.
Only in a look back to go forward sense, where are you feeling about the defense right now? And it's a pity sort of that Murray State is the next opponent. Because I think I feel like there's still, I know that I say this almost every year, but I really feel like there's talent, but obviously that talent didn't show up as much as you would have hoped last week. I feel like for a good stretch, Memphis kind of just did what they wanted to do, and so where is your head at with regards to the defense right now?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of above the consensus because, if you look at the SP Plus and all that stuff, the defense grades out worse than the offense right now. And some of that's baked in preseason expectations, and the preseason expectations were a good bit lower on this defense than it was for the offense. So I think you're catching up with that, plus you just played Ole Miss and Memphis, so the numbers are going to look bad. I don't know that they're going to stay at this level. Certainly you hope they won't. And you might hope that a game playing your FCS is going to help juice those numbers up a good bit to where you're at least getting out of the low 120s, 130s range. But I think that they're close in the sense of you've seen the aggression they're playing with. And the first play from scrimmage, they give up the 50-yard pass down the field and set up the touchdown. But Shams Gianni comes on a corner blitz, and he didn't have him dead to rights necessarily, but there was a play that could have been made there. And if he gets that, maybe it's a strip fumble.
Yeah, a better tackle, and we're not talking about this play basically at all. And that I feel like a lot of that is a credit to Brendan Lewis more than it is okay, Georgia State screwed up.
Yeah, and there was a couple things. I forget, maybe it was on the Sunbelt media call. Dell mentioned they just had the wrong leverage on some of the cornerbacks were playing with the wrong leverage on some of the 3rd and longs, that they gave up some pass plays there, that it was technique just got messed up, and so you hope that stuff continues to get ironed out as the weeks go on. But I think this could be a defense where the explosives don't go away fully because, I feel like we talked about a couple of times, when you're running pretty exotic blitzes for your corners coming from the long side of the field, you could get a home run. And we saw the safety that Marlon Dean forced, which wasn't really on that exotic of a look, but you had him backed up and you were able to get pressure. It was, I think, an encouraging sign there, and you're maybe hoping to see that spark them, but in the second half you didn't really see any of those type of plays. But those are home run type plays that the defense has been lacking for this program for the last few years as it is. Even some good defenses just weren't creating that many. 2021 is the year I think of that they forced a lot of turnovers, but other than that, it hasn't been the strength of this defense, and I kind of feel like that's what they're trying to hang their hat on, and it hasn't worked to the full extent through 2 games, and some of that's level of competition and some of that's been sloppiness. But I think that it could be a fun unit to watch, and it could be maybe you're giving up some of the big plays, but you've got some big plays you force of your own to kind of counteract it. And the other part of it is the offense can't leave you out there for 19 minutes in the second half. I don't. Memphis is a good rushing team, and they were out there a long time kind of leaning on the defense, and so I don't know how much to judge that we still haven't seen a great rushing defense performance when you look at the raw numbers. Thought the first half against Ole Miss was pretty decent, and I think the first half against Memphis, because they weren't on the field all that much, was all right as well. And so I guess I'm looking to see, even going into this week especially, some of those sacks start to pile up more. Some of those times they're running these blitzes, whether they get the sack or whether it forces an errant throw, whatever it might be, you want to start seeing those plays happen more, because it's clearly what the defense is cleared to. It's what the defense is geared to do, and you've seen it with some of the turnovers, the 2 picks in the Ole Miss game, but you haven't seen it like to the level of taking over a game yet. And so I think that's what you're still waiting to see, and it might be that that's what you're hoping for this year, not like the defense that's going to lead the Sun Belt in third down defense and, on the field is like the best defense in the league. It might be more like you're finding your way to win the turnover battle and make those plays kind of happen in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this is a good week, like you said, for Georgia State to kind of figure some stuff out. I'm curious to see how they come out defensively, just because, obviously this is a game that they could lose. I don't expect it, but it is a game that they could lose versus Murray State. But these are the types of games where you can kind of learn some stuff and try some different things. And yeah, necessarily there's going to be a talent gap, but at the same time, like you said, some of the stuff that we saw this past weekend, procedural is not the right word, but it's the execution was never going to work just because the technique wasn't there, and so this is a good game to kind of remember some of that technique and, potentially bring it forwards.
Yeah, and I'll pivot there, set up the Murray State game this Saturday, 7 p.m. ESPN Plus, just like last week against Memphis. No Ask the Expert segment this week. The plainest answer I can give is just didn't have the time for it. I hope that this is just a 1 week siesta on that front, and I also kind of hate the implication it sends of like this is the FCS game and so we don't have one, because when Georgia State is that opponent for teams, it's kind of iffy on whether you get the media coverage from that team's sites of like how seriously they take it, and I much respect the team sites, newspaper people, whoever it is who cover these programs, who take those games seriously, even if they kind of know the expected outcome, and it's certainly not a given. And so as all of this is happening and I'm doing effectively the same thing to Murray State, certainly not my intention, and any Georgia State fan listening to this knows these games have not been gimmies at all. With all that out of the way, they are 0-2 as well. They have lost 45-17 and 45-24 to East Tennessee and the Fighting Will Healy's in his first game since leaving Georgia State to become the Bucs head coach. And then Southeastern Louisiana and old friend quarterback Kyle Lowe in their last game this past Saturday in what was their home opener up in Murray, Kentucky. But they are led by Jody Wright, who is now 1-13 in his time as Murray State's head coach, and he was actually the last person before Sean Elliott to hold the tight ends position coach job at South Carolina. So a little Georgia State connection there in a unique way. SP Plus has this as a projected 47-17 win for Georgia State. There's not a line out for this game. There might be by the time this podcast is released or that you're listening to it, but those don't come out usually till Thursday or Friday for FCS, FBS games. But the nerd numbers from Bill Connolly say that Georgia State should win this game by 30. And for reference, last year, I went back and checked. I think it was a 30-28 projection in the game against Chattanooga. And so even as these games have been a bit of a chore, more than Georgia State fans would want, that does speak to the level of, like, we don't have odds on this game, but the underlying numbers say that there's a chance here for Georgia State to get a comfortable win. Like, they can't take it for granted, and certainly past history shows that fans can't go in this game expecting everything. But on paper, you look at it, and this is a team that gave up 45 points in both of those games. They gave up a lot of rushing yards in those games as well. So that's the thing I look to is we're wondering, we're looking at what does Georgia State need to improve upon. from last game and will like get over the hump. And Murray State's averaging giving up 323 rushing yards a game through 2 games. Big number given up against ETSU especially. And they've only rushed for 77.5 per game in those 2 as well. 4 turnovers from their quarterback, Jim Ogle, who is the co-offensive coordinator's son. So every coach's son has a knack for making football plays. Like, you look across the sport, it's the same in basketball as well. Just like, you've always got to be wary of that. But as we were just talking about what the defense is trying to do, if they're showing these pressures, they might have a little bit more success in these moments, particularly if they can establish the run game and keep the Georgia State offense on the field and putting up points and get them behind the game script. That could be their opportunity where you start to see some of the turnovers, some of those sack plays kind of pile up. But it starts with just kind of like going about their business, showing up the right mentality, which we spoke to Del McGee and players earlier in the week, and it never is apparent until the game happens that there's an issue. Like, they're saying all the right things and saying it without saying, like, a coach would never say, we expect it to be 0-2, because if you think you're going to lose any game, that you don't want that person leading your program. But I asked Dell about like where the team's mood was at, how practice was after the 0-2 start, and he said something along the lines of like the players understood who was on the schedule, and so it's not like the 0-2 start of like you might have had years past where it's kind of like, I think they understood that it wasn't likely for them to win either of those games, especially both of those games, so it's like you're not necessarily worrying about the team losing positivity, getting into issues of like, where's the locker room at? But we'll know for sure on Saturday. And so kind of setting the stage at like, that's what SP Plus thinks this game is going to be, where it should be a comfortable win on paper. I think Georgia State fans want to see that. I think the Georgia State projections for the rest of the season need that, because right now all they've gotten is a couple of ugly scores that have not helped out their numbers. But I think the team also could use it, because Vanderbilt looks like a good team, and they could go down to South Carolina this week and it could be 3-0 entering the game in Nashville next weekend. But I still feel like it's gettable in the sense of like, you're not giving that game away in your head. If you aren't playing well in this game, if it's a close game, even if it's still a win, certainly that game looks like more of a reach, and it starts to make you wonder how many of these FBS programs that Georgia State is going to be able to beat. So a lot on the line as far as what we can expect out of this team for the remainder of the season, which you don't love that being the spot for the FCS game, which you kind of hope can just be about getting good reps and all that, but that is kind of the curse of starting the season the way you did, playing the teams you were.
Yeah, I agree. I know that there's going to be some questions about Finley's health, and that's fine. Non-throwing arm injury, so, I expect that he'll play. I don't know too many guys who wouldn't play under those circumstances. But if he plays like he did in the first half against Memphis, this should be a very good and easy win for Georgia State, because, even though he's not a mobile QB, I felt that he was moving the pocket very well. I thought he was buying himself some time a little bit. Some of the negative plays that he had with his legs weren't even on him, really. I
think the play you mentioned on the post-game show was the first drive, the sack before the missed field goal, where the running back was just in his lap before he could really do anything there. And it's like, you need your protection to hold up a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say, I wonder if he's not 100%, if the fact that Murray State's given up a lot of rushing yards, if it might just make sense to go with Cameron Brown this week. Whether or not TJ Finley is still your guy, I think there's a lot of reason to think that you trust him because of the way he looked in the last game, and you want him to keep building confidence because TJ Finley's not going to have eternal eligibility, and so if you want Cam Brown to stick around, you want him to be growing in this offense as well. And just based on what we saw from him and TJ took some sacks, and some of them I think He did hang in the pocket a little bit, but Cameron Brown, you're not as worried about that. You've got the mobility a little bit more, I would say. Plus whatever you can offer as far as designed run, which I don't think you're calling all that many of those for TJ.
Yeah, that's true. They'll probably see Brown. Honestly, if you're probably right. I didn't think. I guess because I was so caught up on it's the off arm part of it. I didn't consider they could just play Brown the whole game, and there might be an actual game strategy reason to do that. He looked good. Like I know we talked about it in the post game, but I feel like I certainly have more confidence in his ability to lead a game this weekend than I did to him being the starter going into last week. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I totally wrote him off on microphone, but I was way too early to call that putt on him after the Ole Miss game. Game circumstance dictated a lot of that, and he looked a lot more comfortable running the offense against Memphis. And he's the backup, quote unquote. I think it feels like if TJ's healthy, he's the guy right now. But it wouldn't be a case of you're taking this game for granted. We saw what Cameron Brown can do. I think they would also trust him to play. It's just a case of being smart with the personnel you have, and it's a place where Bernard Causey, cornerback, didn't practice the day we went to talk to media. Safety Jordan Huff was out. Deuce Lewis on the defensive line. And I believe DeAndre Duffus, the right guard, also was held out of practice. And uncertainty there, I guess. And maybe you're worried about the drop-off there with the depth, or you're maybe playing some younger guys. But that's a spot where you have an injury, but you feel like you trust the guy who's sitting, waiting in the wings. And it also makes sense, as I lay out, just who you're playing and where their weakness might be on the defensive side, to play the guy who's got more mobility and then let TJ rest up. I mean, even through the bye week, if you're talking about big picture, since he's new to the offense anyway, obviously there was some Christmas there when he was in the game in the first half before his injury. But if you still think he could help you out, but you just want to give Cam Brown a couple weeks of reps, see what he can offer you, get through the bye week at the end of September, and have both of them ready to go for conference play, I don't think that's a crazy idea either. I kind of think if you pick a guy, you need to go with him, though. It's like we laid out on the post-game show. Whether you wanted them to go with Cam Brown or TJ Finley in the second half against Memphis, they chose someone. I think that was important. Going forward, it seems like he's tried to say, you're going to see both quarterbacks, and I kind of hope it isn't just a trading series thing. I guess we'll see what the decision is.
I mean, even last year when they were kind of doing that with Gibson and Veer, it really did not seem like that was what they wanted to do. And a big part of why they ended up doing it was just because of injury anyways. Yes, obviously this is the same situation, but I would be shocked if they did it on a trading series basis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think they don't mind kind of the uncertainty out there, just because they trust both guys, and whatever possible competitive advantage they can glean from everyone having to prep multiple quarterbacks. And in this case, multiple quarterbacks that offer you different things. It isn't like a 1A, 1B where it's kind of the same offense. There are skills that they're going to lean on with TJ that Cameron, they're going to ask him to do some different things. But I think a commonality here, and this is something kind of ties the whole offensive plan around. Coach McGee had mentioned Murray's runs a 4-2-5. He's mentioned some of the coverages they like. They run some quarters. The thing that I think of when you hear about 4-2-5 is that they're going to have a nickel instead of a linebacker. And so if early in the game they don't sub in an extra linebacker and you've got 5 DBs, maybe a lightish box, or even if it's you rotate the nickel over, but that's still a DB and not a linebacker, that has to be to your advantage to establish the run better than you did last week. And if you're playing some zones over the top, playing some quarters, it's just going to be about the quarterback making smart decisions, not forcing throws. And then if you get an opportunity where you've got some man opportunities on the perimeter, of the games on the schedule, you feel like this is a chance where Ted Hurst's athleticism is going to shine. I don't know their defensive backfield, and their passing numbers as a defense are better than the rushing numbers. So I'm not just like saying Ted Hurst is going to be able to go off, but you do know that he has exhibited an ability to beat good DBs deep in Sunbelt play last year. And the other part that we've now seen in both games is if you've got Javon Robinson unmanned in the slot and he gets a step on his guy, he's going to go to the house. He's got 2 40-plus yard touchdown catches in just the first 2 games. And so you feel more comfortable. There was the question heading into the season of like who wide receiver 2 was going to be. And I mean, technically right now, wide receiver 2 is Ted Hurst because Javon Robinson has more receiving yards than Ted does. But I think you've got your answer there. And so those are a couple of guys you're going to look to. And even as we've spent a lot of time talking about special teams being what it's been, TJ Payton was like real close to housing the kickoff return, the one he took out past the 30. Wonder if this is the game where you get some good feelings about the special teams. You get another nice return from TJ. Freshman has a moment. Special teams is able to have a positive thing happen for them. The other thing to watch there, though, is something that Dell talked about in the press conference, is that they're expecting like all of the wrinkles, like sky kicks, surprise onsides, that type of deal. It's something that he said has been in Coach Wright's playbook. And with the idea of them coming in as underdogs, not having a lot to lose, certainly attention to detail and those little things are going to matter for the special teams. That they've struggled in that area, so it'll be a good test.
So bad.
If they go into this game with the idea of like we're going to face these type of surprise situations, they're going to throw some random kicks at us, and they get through the game without incident. Maybe, like I was saying, Peyton gets a nice return. Even though it's the FCS opponent and you're not going to try and take too much away from the game as a whole, that's kind of the thing that has been, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. Like, that's been stuff where they've just been flat beating themselves regardless of who they were lining up against. And so it would still be a meaningful thing if they were able to avoid any of those little snafus, especially knowing that there could be coming. And it almost is worse if they've talked all before the game about expecting it and they get caught out by something. That would even speak to a greater cause for concern. So watching the special teams with some alertness this week, just because I've prepped for the idea that Murray State might throw some funkiness in there. But also, maybe this is where you have the opportunity to make your FBS advantage shine in those types of situations. You kind of hope that could be the case. But I think there's a chance we get done with this. If it goes how it's expected, it'll be like, yeah, it's a comfortable win. It doesn't change a whole lot about the outlook, but there's ways that we can learn about this team this week. And certainly if it doesn't go well, if it's another dogfight with one of these FCS opponents, it's cause for concern about what Del McGee is saying he's trying to institute actually being possible with him as head coach. So it's like 0-3 would be a problem, and it would also be, 3-12 at that point in the tenure with an FCS loss. Like, that is reaching point of no return territory.
Yeah, 0-3 being a problem is an understatement. Like, this is not a must win in the sense of like, oh, you need this for your goals, but like you need this in the sense that like you need this.
It kind of is. I mean, in the world where like they lose this one and somehow rattle off 5 straight in conference play after starting 0-4, presuming they would also lose to Vandy, then it'd be like, well, we'd be making a bowl game after this miraculous turnaround, but we didn't win against the team that in all likelihood we were going to be likely favorites against. It's like, it is going to be an obstacle to the goals because you do need this. If you're just talking about bowl game as a flat, like giving you to 6 wins, getting you into 6-win territory, it's why you schedule these games. At the end of the day, you want to win on the schedule. And we'll see what happens. I feel like we always temper these. They haven't actually lost one of these since the first game in Center Park Stadium. Tennessee State 2017 is the last time they've actually lost one of these games against an FCS, and it was unfortunately a hallmark of even the transition years, the early time being an FBS program, that they were still dropping these games. And so it's been more shaky than it has been like the capital C concern that it was 2013 to 2016 time. But it's going to take a few more years, or a few years of winning these games by the margin that it expected before you start to feel real comfortable. especially because this team's already 0-2, so you're already just kind of anxious for that win to begin with.
Yeah, I was about to say, we couched them because I believe the last, 2 or 3, they've needed, fourth quarter comebacks in order to win the games. I know they did last year. Furman, I mean, that one was a weird game. I can't remember.
Rhode Island
down in the fourth.
I don't know.
No, I think the fourth was when they,
Rhode Island, they were just always... Rhode Island and Furman, I think they were nursing leads down the stretch and just kind of had to hang on rather than having to... Kennesaw, obviously, they had to come get a game-winning drive. Pretty miraculous stuff in hindsight. I mean, especially with that team only winning 2 games. But you don't want those exciting moments in these type of games, unfortunately. With all the respect to these opponents, and the last few they've played have been good FCS programs, you don't want that in your life if you're Georgia State. And so an opportunity... but they've got to go out there and do it. It's going to come from the work that they put in rather than they are Georgia State and they can beat Murray State. Because, by the way, the other reason it will feel weird to kind of just take this as a granted is the Racers are 1-0 all-time against Georgia State. They won 48-24 in the second year Georgia State's program in 2011. So it's that makes it even sillier to make it feel like it's just a game you can file away as an automatic win. No matter what else aside, it's just kind of you're talking like that, it starts to make you think you're just not recognizing maybe where Georgia State had been in its distant past when they were very capable of losing to Murray State.
Well, with that, I think we can transition to the pick'em. So this is actually really funny. I don't know. I assume you're pulling it up by now. So my error that I kept on the sheet ended up tying us. Because I definitely thought that Marshall would beat Missouri State, but they didn't. And because of my mistake, I said that it was, I turned in the test. So we are tied hilariously. So that's at least fun. But this week, I think it's going to be a pretty easy week. There's the results from last week. If y'all are curious, you are muted. You are muted.
We're going to get in a lot more dissension coming up.
Yes.
Because the Sun Belt games are going to be tighter, and you had a lot more, whether it was the FCS games for the Sun Belt or them being maybe in some bye spots. Start to see some more times where we diverge.
Yeah, this is
even starting this week.
Yeah, this is definitely a week where that's certainly going to happen. I mean, for the most part, we have Georgia State, Memphis, and Auburn winning their games versus Sun Belt opponents.
Yeah, I gotta say, not to totally, I'm a bit confused by I think Troy is down to 3.5 point underdogs. I felt like it is a bit of an overreaction to how close they played Clemson. If I am wrong on this, I'm just wrong on Troy, and Troy is going to be one of the better teams in the Sun Belt West, and I just haven't seen that. But the implication being that I think Georgia State would be almost 2 touchdown dogs on the road at Troy, and I don't know that those teams are that far apart if you just play out the line logic there of where the Georgia State line ended against Memphis, but curious to see. That's certainly going to be one of the more interesting games to watch this weekend as far as what is the Sun Belt and who are going to be the better players in it. Because if this Troy team in year 2 under Jared Parker is capable of beating Memphis, even though it's a home game, they're serious players in a division that I'm really not sure. Is it Texas State, I guess, is the best team, but Louisiana seems worse than expected, and I think they'll struggle against Missouri. I guess you don't. You're picking them to beat Mizzou. I'm stepping on your upset there, unless you've done it again.
I think I've done it again. God dang it. How does this keep happening to me? But like I said, I'll leave it in. That was not what I... Okay, well, I think I just need to cross-reference the other spreadsheet that I have, but we'll get to that. I agree with you, though.
I think they're 27.5 point dogs in Como, would be a remarkable shot call that we can edit around. If you're right, we can make it seem like a lot less of an accident, if that'll help you.
Exactly. I agreed though. Like I watched that Troy Clemson game because I saw that Troy was up at halftime, and there was at no point in that second half did it really feel like Troy was actually pushing Clemson. Certainly felt like Clemson was just playing with their food there. So maybe Vegas is just giving Troy a lot of respect, and hey, that happens. We've seen it before. But see, yeah.
So we're both on Georgia State over Murray State.
What the heck?
We're both on Memphis over Troy.
Yeah.
We are both on Auburn over South Alabama, though I think that line's a little bit large. South Alabama looks pretty good. They almost beat Tulane. Like,
I don't think Auburn's
we both
gonna
got
cover
Tulane
that.
right, but I don't think we had the spirit of that game correct.
No,
South Al played them pretty close.
Yeah.
We apparently diverge on, I guess, Iowa State, Arkansas State. Do you want the Red Wolves to win, or is that another one where you have written down the Sun Belt team by default?
Yes, I think this is another one where I just wrote down the Sun Belt team.
Okay.
Because I remember I had to, before an event on Monday, I was at a bar and I happened to be watching most of the Iowa State-Iowa game. And shout out Iowa. Just part of why I'm saying this is because I just love Iowa football so much. Because I'm not a fan, because watching them try offense is just excruciating. But like Iowa State seems very good this year. How top level good remains to be seen, but I feel like that defense is going to be pretty nasty. But obviously, I'm hanging my hat on the Red Wolves now due to my own user error.
To be clear, no asterisk. Like if I win this by like 2 points, and it's because of these ones you have accidentally put down.
No,
even though it worked last week.
Yeah, couch it. Like that's fine.
That is a personal mistake. Like we are not going to be asterisking my win for this
Correct.
pick'em based on that. Like
no,
that is,
absolutely. Like I said last week, I turned in the test.
So, surprise dissension. A couple I wasn't expecting, but we split. I think Iowa State can handle business. Glad that game's happening in Jonesboro. Obviously, less of those seem to be happening year on year on year, and so Big 12 team coming into town, can't ever be mad about that.
Big ups to Arkansas State's schedule this year. Like they I've enjoyed who they put on their schedule.
Well, there's now going to be, we'll see what it leads to, like political pressure to just keep scheduling this game. I don't know, annually or whatever, but like the folks in Little Rock want this game to keep being in Little Rock between Arkansas and Arkansas State, and so that could stick around.
I hope so.
We'll have to wait and see on that, especially with the 9-game SEC thing. It could be easy to just be like, we really wanted to, but darn, we just don't have the space on the schedule. But would be fun if it happens. It's amazing that it took this long for them to play for the first time as in-state foes.
I can't believe you broke that to me. Like I really didn't believe. I thought you were joking when you said that.
Yeah, no. Another spot where we both have Marshall winning. Marshall kind of in the same vein as Georgia State. Like, you got to win this one. Got to beat EKU. Just got to handle business here. I have Old Dominion at that point probably facilitating the coaching change that is probably coming either way in Blacksburg. I'm in a family line of Hokies, so it brings me no pleasure. But they got 34-0 in the second half against Vandy at home last week in their home opener. They're 0-2. I kind of think ODU's got the better quarterback here in Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech versus Colton Joseph at ODU. ODU's played a metric ton of one-score games under Ricky Ronnie, and Brent Pry's record, I don't have it in front of me, but it is quite bad in one-score games. And so I think there's a chance for Virginia Tech gets a lead, sits on it, and they're fine here. But if it's close late and you don't have a rooting interest in the game, or you're looking for something to grab onto, I think we could see some real end of an era type stuff happen, because I think ODU's built for it this year. They hung with Indiana better than people expected. So I think the Sun Belt could get another signature win against a power conference opponent this week. I guess you say that too in a couple of spots I didn't have picked, so I'm joining in the party.
Yeah. I thought about this one. I did pick. I thought about this a lot because I agree with you. Like I don't want to disagree with you. I just feel like we did the same thing last year, and then Virginia Tech blew them out. Like it's I don't
think I did. I think I had VT winning that one. My hopes were high for the Hokies at that point.
Okay.
I think I was like, I think that's catnip. I don't think we should fall for this. I don't know if I recorded that take on, and like I can't prove that, but I'm pretty sure I was even though it was in Norfolk, I was like, I don't know here. But this year, I'm basically selling all my Brent Pry stock. I feel like it's getting played out at this point, and this feels like it could be the last dying whimper.
Yeah, that's what sucks about it, because if you look at their schedule, this really is like the 2-week stretch where if there's going to be a go time for them, like it's got to start here. Like there is no other stretch where you're like, oh, okay, that's 8 quarters where you can gain some confidence on your schedule. Like it's
ACC
really
looks better.
Bath. Yeah,
like it
does.
is a bad year for them to maybe be spotty, because even like Cal, who they play, looks fun. They got the quarterback's name, who I'm not going to try and pronounce and get wrong. I edit this pod, so that I am taking that responsibility away from myself later. But it'll be interesting to see.
Oh Jesus!
Also, a series that's more going away.
Yeah, no, that's not happening.
Keeping it on games we've got on the sheet, we both have Jacksonville State going to Statesboro, giving the Eagles an 0-3 start. This is one I laid out the case on this very podcast of like, what if this West Coast trip goes wrong and the season just hits Georgia Southern into a tailspin like Georgia State did in 2022, kind of a different circumstance, but the same principle. And I think that West Coast trip went as bad as it possibly could have for Georgia Southern. Like there could have been 0-2 and it be in a better spot, but they lose by 28 at Fresno. I don't know quite how bad the defense is, especially against the run, but like I don't know that they're going to sit at the bottom of FBS in these statistics, but Jacksonville State runs the heck out of the ball. Cam Cook is like one of the top rushers in the nation right now for Jacksonville State. And so I just think matchup-wise and just where they are at, I kind of think it's a spot Jacksonville State is a slight road dog, can come in, and as they are one of the teams competing to win Conference USA, this would be a nice signature win for them, but it also, I think, would keep the existential kind of dread that's going on in Statesboro about where they're going under newly extended Clay Helton. What the direction of the program is. They need this one in a different way from how Georgia State needs this one. Like it'd be 1-2 all the same, but it would be a chance to maybe row back some positivity, which has been lacking down south for the team from Statesboro.
Yeah, and I think part of why this one feels so important is just because of where we thought that Georgia Southern would be this year. Yes, you were correct that the West Coast trip to start the season could be pretty disastrous. And, I know that Georgia State is, in their minds right now, but when we started this pod, I had looked up just to see who in the Sun Belt's defense had been struggling. Georgia Southern's given up as many points as Georgia State has. I don't know if all 101 of them are just defensive. Maybe it is, but at the end of the day, that team has allowed as many points as Georgia State has, and they probably don't love that, considering where their preseason expectations are. So, they could certainly be in some trouble here. And I think Jacksonville State, just had a nice win against Liberty at home last week. Like, they're coming in with
should have gotten UCF in the opener.
Should have.
They had
absolutely.
A real chance to get that one.
Super did. They're certainly coming in with some confidence. And that, we have certainly seen Georgia Southern lose games like this before.
Yeah, and the Battle of the Rock, App State going down to Hattiesburg to play Southern Miss. I like Southern Miss here at home. App seems like baseline is still like they'll be a bowl team. I don't think, if you were hoping for the bottom to fall out, I don't think that's happening, but I just think it's a spot where they've been a bit sloppy in their first 2 games, and they haven't been playing the type of team that's been able to make them pay for it, and I just kind of think the Golden Eagles have enough to get them here, and Braylon Braxton will be like the best quarterback they've faced by some large order of magnitude. And you add in his ability to move with his legs. I just think it could be a tricky spot for the Mountaineers heading on the road. I guess technically for the second time, but on a road in a campus stadium for the first time, heading down to Southern Miss.
Yeah, I thought about that, and I think it's similar to the ODU vein. I guess I'm just not willing to do it with App State here because of how they've looked so far this year. They don't look like they did when they were just bulldozing through the Sun Belt. I'm not going to tell you that they do, but I still think that they do look competent enough, like you said, bowl eligible type team, to where it wouldn't shock me if they were able to just kind of do what they do, lean on the run a little bit, and kind of just flex some muscle here. It's what they've done. I think the defense so far this year, that the defense has been really good. You might want to see a little bit more out of the offense just in terms of converting, all of that yard gaining to points.
They've had a situation where they've had a receiver fumble the ball like inside the 1 yard line in both of their games so far.
Yeah, they've not played crisp football at all, which is weird because they're coming off of, 2 back-to-back wins. But like last week wasn't the most impressive of wins, I know I'm kind of couching myself a little bit. The defense played really well. They didn't give up a touchdown until I think the fourth quarter, which, it's never a bad day at the office.
So it was 2013 they beat FCS Lindenwood. Yardage-wise, they were comfortably up, but they just did not ever have the put away. Just kept keeping them in the game, and I think Lindenwood got an onside also late in the game that could have given them a chance to tie or take the lead. Didn't play out that way, but dicier than the natives. Yeah, the turnovers also, it just got dicier than they would have wanted on the scoreboard. So we'll see.
I mean, it'll be a good game. I think this is, I believe, our first, relatively marquee Sun Belt matchup.
It's the first one, because we have now gotten, as of tonight as we're recording this podcast, shout out Scott Watkins, former Panther Talk correspondent, put out on Twitter the first injury report. We got our first availability report, and I'll tell you, the Sun Belt's going the extra mile. It's color coordinated. You got different colors for
heck yeah,
in, out, probable. We got the whole scale covered. I wasn't sure what we were getting, so I should have known. The boys at the Fun Belt Conference would have gone to the absolute mat for this stuff. But this is the first conference game that we will have, and so we are now seeing for the first time the availability report that was teased right before the start of the season. So conference season does start with those two playing Saturday night. And the last two we have, I don't really have to spend a lot of time on. ECU at Coastal. Both have the East Carolina Pirates taking care of business on the road. Bit concerned for the Chanticleers in year 3 under Tim Beck. And then we both have Arizona State completing the home-to-home sweep. Won in San Marcos last year on Thursday. They host the Bobcats this year. I think Texas State's a good team. Seem like one of the better teams in the West. I just think just because Arizona State just lost in Clang and Clangaland at Mississippi State last week, that you're catching them at the wrong time. This is still a good team that was in the playoff last year, and they're going to be a bit PO'd heading into this home game against Texas State. So that's kind of my reasoning behind going against the belt.
Yeah, I agree. Texas State's probably good, but Arizona State this is going to be one of those games where, based on last week, things could certainly get ugly here.
So depending on how the games we actually picked against each other shape out, plus the ones that are unlikely to go in your favor that we picked against, we could get some real separation on the board here. Could be a big week for me.
Yes, and I promise that next week I will make sure that the picks are the picks that I want. It is my distinct homework.
We are an integrity pod, though. We respect your love for the game and sticking with your picks, and you just have to figure out for next week's pod if Louisiana goes to Columbia and wins, your actual reasoning you're going to go with, and stop with the pretense that you didn't have this picked all along if the Cajuns do the job.
I think it's fun.
Before the season started, that would have been one of the bigger upset picks because people were unsure about Mizzou and people thought Louisiana was going to be one of the teams in the belt, and it's not how it's played out, but maybe for one special Saturday, that's how it looks again.
Yeah, I know it's been 6 years, but I feel like I had some sound logic going into the, Georgia State over Tennessee take. Like that, I was thinking through that, at least slightly. Whereas, I don't want to just be the guy who shoots from the hip. Like, I feel like I don't have too many hot takes. I certainly am a little bit riskier than you are, but... it's not like I'm out here just pretending like the 130th team in FBS is just going to, walk over everybody. That's not me talking about a specific team,
now,
by the way.
I've got some. There's already stuff I've got loaded, like ready to go for conference play. I've got some upsets that I will not get talked off of, no matter what the season looks like at that point. So I tease for later in the season. I forget which week. There's one game in particular I will not be moved off of. I think the upset is going to happen. So
I look forward to it.
Last thing before we close this week, we'll actually be a cross-sport pod again. We've been kind of waiting for the right time when, frankly, we weren't going an hour, 20 minutes on the pod to bring basketball back because we did get some fun scheduling news. And then the schedule as a whole is kind of taking shape. But first, a game that doesn't count, but I think means a great deal. Georgia is coming to the Convocation Center. The Bulldogs will come to Georgia State for an exhibition on October 15th at 7 p.m. It is called the CareSource Invitational because that is the organization. It's a mission-aligned initiative, a nonprofit managed care organization that aims at normalizing the mental health conversation nationwide, breaking the stigma, and promoting the overall well-being of children and teens. There's some quotes from the article as well from Georgia State's kind of launch of this from both coaches. Obviously, I feel like it's a game that has come together, at least in some small part, to Jonas Hayes being a Georgia Bulldog, having some relationships and trying to make this game happen. But obviously, fans of Georgia State would have wanted this to be a regular season game, a la the Georgia Tech game in the first year of the Convocation Center. But honestly, I just think good cause, fun afternoon, evening, I guess, and a chance that just embrace this for what it is. Like, it isn't a regular season game. It's not going to have real stakes at it, but one, it'll give you some kind of glimpse of how you shake up against a team that's been flirting with the tournament the last couple of years, made the tournament last year in Georgia. And also just like this is like treat this as a dress rehearsal for the real deal. Like if you were thinking like we want to get them here for a game, if this is a raucous environment, if both fan bases make a big show and have some fun with this game, could be something that turns into like that is your path to getting this back on the schedule. Because ultimately, Georgia's going to do it if they feel like it's going to prepare them for the rest of their season. And if the team in Georgia State is good enough that like losing them wouldn't necessarily like wreck their metrics too much. So it's a chance for the team and the fan base alike to just kind of all put on a show to where I don't hold out especially high hopes that this will stay on this schedule or come back in a regular season game anytime soon. But kind of your path to doing it is winning, whether it's the team competing, whether it's the fan base getting out there and filling out the Convocation Center. Like that's how you make it the type of thing that you could see in the future again by treating this as a marquee.
Yeah, I'm excited that we have some, things trickling out about basketball. I think this is a really good cause, and I like it when Georgia State scrimmages or plays exhibitions against in-state opponents. I really wish that there was a more a stronger effort to get Georgia State and like UGA and Georgia Tech to play every year. I know that they just completed the Georgia Tech series, which is nice. Like that, I know that Georgia State had a couple of crazy games in there, and I understand why Georgia Tech wouldn't necessarily want to reschedule it to start. But it was fun. It's fun when Georgia and Georgia State play. Like Georgia State at a time was the premier basketball school in the state. Basketball in the state of Georgia ran through the Panthers more or less. So, maybe that has not been the case the last few years, but I still think it's a good idea when, these states have, the interstate teams playing each other consistently, especially from the top down.
If I can say it diplomatically, I feel like it's not been the worst thing that Georgia State has not played these programs the last couple of years. I also don't know if it's been a priority for Jonas Hayes and his staff to get these teams on the program at that exact moment.
Sure.
You obviously want the program to be at a place where you think you can win those games. And if you don't think that's the case, it may not be the worst idea to not push the issue too much. So a happy medium here. We're also, I don't know if we're set. I guess we haven't gotten the official schedule out, but I feel like the out-of-conference schedule as a whole seems pretty full to me. We had heard from Rocco Miller, schedule guy extraordinaire, across the sport of college basketball. Forget exactly when the news dropped originally, but he had said Presbyterian is going to come to Georgia State for a home game this season, and Presbyterian put out their schedule, and so we now know that game will happen on November 10th. So that is what I think at this point is going to be the home opener, because they're going to start at Eastern Michigan in the MAC Sun Belt Challenge, and then they go to Cincinnati on November 7th. So there'll probably be an exhibition other than the Georgia game late October that'll be the first proper, I guess, like tune-up type game before the regular season, and that'll be at home. But I think the home opener, feel pretty safe projecting, will be Presbyterian. And they're also Cancun on 3. They're doing the Cancun Challenge MTE event. We're kind of waiting to see if there was an MTE-sized gap in the schedule. So that will involve, they're going to go to just a traditional road game at South Dakota State on November 21st in Brookings before they will head to Cancun, and on site they will play Samford on November 25th and New Mexico State on November 26th. So I think an interesting mix there of mid-major programs. Certainly all of them have been good tournament teams in the past decade. You're kind of catching them in different spots, but I think that's a good mix of teams. I think getting to Cancun, probably one of the better tournament atmospheres you could hope for as a player, and the support staff, the staff to get out there. I mean, obviously you're there to do a job, but I think that probably does a lot more than staying at home like they did the first couple of years under Jonas, but also some good competition to go up against. And so to kind of run through it real quick, at Eastern Michigan, November 3rd, at Cincinnati, November 7th, versus Presbyterian on November 10th, versus Fort Valley State and non-D1 on November 13th, at Arizona State on November 17th, and then the Cancun Challenge games from the 21st to the 26th. In December, go to Mercer December 2nd, go to Kennesaw December 5th, before you host Jacksonville State on December 13th, start conference play the week after that with some road games, and then come back after the holidays, December 28th. It's been put out that they will play Columbia College on December 28th. And then at some point in February, they will play a MAC team, which we have not determined yet. And depending on how good the team is, that could be a pretty good home matchup in the middle of conference season. We will have to wait and see who that is. And so I think the one thing, and I've kind of put this out in various spots online, I kind of think you'd rather have either the Mercer or the Kennesaw game at home. Both of them being on the road at the same time feels like just a mismatched schedule situation. But I think on the whole, you look at the teams they're playing, it's not like last year where you have the 3 SEC games where you're just like filing those fully away. Arizona State, Cincy are both kind of fringy. Is their coach in a safe spot heading in this year type teams? And I think the mid-majors you play, it's a good group of teams. And so I think we'll know what we need to know about this team based on who they have scheduled by the time conference play rolls around. And that ultimately is what you're hoping for when you're scheduling for non-conference in basketball.
Yeah, I like the schedule. We'll talk about the roster and the team at large, but it seems like a good schedule for now. So, but that's not going to be the most important thing for this basketball team anyways. So,
yeah, I mean, lots to learn, just in general, like new faces, how they're going to gel and all that. And like I say, not officially out yet. I would have thrown up like the actual graphic on screen if the Georgia State had put it out yet, but they have not done so, so we're waiting for it to be official. I just don't know where in the schedule there is room for any other games to slide in, so that's why I kind of expect, other than whatever other exhibition they play, this is basically going to be it, plus the Sun Belt games. Going to be interested to find out about this team heading into a pivotal year for Jonas Hayes and his staff here at Georgia State, but that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back. No suspense this time. Now that you know we're doing the post-game thing, you can expect to hear from us on Sunday, thereabouts, as we look at what does happen when Georgia State and Murray State line up in Center Park Stadium on Saturday evening. Sure, we'll have more on basketball as the weeks go on, looking to speak to both head coaches of the men's and women's teams as we get closer to the season. There might be some good bye week content on the football side. But for now, from me and David, thank you for listening. We will catch you next time on the Thursday Night Podcast.